This podcast is a product of the Fourth and Inches Network,
a podcast network designed to keep Husky fans up to date on their favorite programs around UW.
Enjoy the show and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Hey, Husky fans, welcome back to Fourth and Inches, a Husky podcast from the Fourth and Inches Network. My name is Trevor Mueller, and with me is Scott Hedgcock. He is the founder and leader of Montlake Players. He is also a founding member of Aletheian, which is a financial planning agency that has worked closely with the University of Washington. He's a Washington native, grew up in Kingston, went to Washington in 1997, and now he's a financial advisor since 2006. 2019, he started Aletheian Wealth Advisors, and after hiring two former UW players as associates, Levon Coleman and Cameron Van Winkle, started an intern program teaching Washington football players about financial literacy and entrepreneurship. He's hosted 18 student athletes so far. Montlake Players has grown out of that internship. He's also a local community member, really active in nonprofits. And most importantly, he's been married to Kristen for 17 years and has 4 wonderful children. So Scott, impressive biography. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate just a chance to come on and talk a little bit about something I'm really passionate about, which is obviously Husky football and UW athletics and the Montlake Players stuff that we're doing.
So, and absolutely. And I want to go back all the way to the beginning. You told me about your first experience going to a game that you actually remember. So let's talk a little bit about how you became a Washington fan.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was actually born in Moses Lake, so that's Cougar country for those that don't know. And my father had gone to the University of Washington, so he raised us right. We were UW fans. My grandfather, who worked in construction on campus, he worked for the university, helped with building a lot of the South Campus. He had season tickets, and so the first game that I remember him taking me to was the 1990 USC versus UW. Todd Marinovich classically saying, "All I saw was purple." So that was my baptism into Husky football.
Awesome. And going through, you went to the University of Washington. You came out as a financial planner. When did that seed get planted in your head that you could give back to a program like Washington football that you and your family has been so tied to for your entire life?
Yeah, I think I saw the opportunity most clearly when shortly after we founded the firm in 2019. So I'd worked in the industry since 2006 and worked at a few different places, and then struck out on our own with a couple other guys who were starting up the firm. And as we went and started looking for some early on associates to join us, we wanted some younger people. And it's funny, I'd actually connected with Cameron Van Winkle through Twitter. It's a bit of a funny story. He had never really gotten a shot at kicking in the NFL. And he was
I remember those videos. He was putting up videos of him kicking 60, 65-yard field goals. And it was weird. It didn't seem like he even got a workout.
Yeah, I could be. Yeah, I don't think he even got a workout. And so it was interesting. The Seahawks had gone with Blair Walsh, who I think it was 2018, was having a pretty bad year. Yeah. And so Cam kept tweeting at him. It was like, that's Blair Walsh would miss, and then Cam would be like, "I'm still available, come get me." And so I just went and looked him up and saw he was actually working as a realtor at the time. And I just connected with him and was like, "Hey, would love to network. I'm in finance and you're in real estate. And if there's a way I could be helpful or we could network together, would love to do it." And we kind of just started hanging out and kind of became, kind of did some work together and kind of became friends through that. And then eventually we coaxed him over to join us full time as not as a realtor anymore, but as an associate at the firm, helping out with financial planning stuff and broadly speaking, just wealth management. and then through that, then he enjoyed the process of, he started out as an intern and then got hired as an associate with us. He introduced us to Levon Coleman, who had finished his time in the NFL and was looking for his next chapter. So Levon did the same thing. He became an intern and then eventually was an associate with us as well. And so that was really, I think, the idea of, it was kind of Levon and Cam's idea that they said, you know, it's been really helpful to get this education as you've onboarded us. We would have loved to have known a lot of this stuff around financial literacy, around entrepreneurship. We would have loved to have known this while we were still in college. And so we said, well, hey, why don't we reach out to UW and see if we can have some interns in during the summer? And that's kind of how it started. And now we're coming up on it'll be our 4th year of doing that with the program. And so, yeah, that's really what sparked the idea, was just really seeing the need of it. That, you know, I'm not gonna play a sad song for college football players. They get a pretty good deal, but they also miss out on some important things. The amount of time they spend working out, going to practice, it is a full-time job on top of full-time school. So it's difficult for them to find internships. It's difficult for them to get real world experience. And, you know, I tell the guys, all of them are going to be professionals at something. Right. It's the minority of them that will be professional football players. And even those that are, they're not going to do it forever. You know, the average time in the league is under 4 years. So they need to start learning skills that are going to be applicable outside of the field. And so we try to help them with that because we think it's valuable and important.
And, you know, that's kind of why I was really interested in getting you on here to educate our listener base about really your philosophies around that, because I do think of, after the lights go off, I had a friend who had a podcast called After the Orange Slices. Once, you know, not that any of these players, especially if you come through the University of Washington, there's people that are going to remember your name, but at some point there has to be, and this is the term that while we were talking before we started that really stuck in my mind, was value added. And what value are you going to add outside of what you were when you were playing at the University of Washington or in the NFL? Like, what other value are you going to bring to the workforce, I guess is my question. And how do you see yourself tied into that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is the question of how does the market work? How do you build businesses that are sustainable? And you know, I think you know, we're in a modern economy, and you know, there's a lot of discussions. You know, we could go in that whole direction around, you know, wealth and how is wealth built, and you know, equality of opportunity, and you know, equality of access and equality of outcome, and you know, there's all this stuff that it's really important, really interesting stuff. But the thing I always come back to is, at some point, it stops being academic and it just becomes really real for the individual. And I think, you know, especially for I could just use the example a little bit of how I think this is tied in with a bit of Levon's story. And I don't, you know, he's a pretty open guy, so I don't think I'm sharing anything I shouldn't. But, you know, and I'll contrast that with Cam. Cam actually became a realtor while he was still at the UW. So he actually sold his first house while he was still playing football in college. Yeah, Levon went the route of being a free agent. He was undrafted. He made it in the league for a little bit, made it on an active roster, which was awesome. You know, that's sort of a life dream to suit up and be an active roster. He did that for Green Bay. But, you know, once he was out of the NFL, other than just trying to get another shot in the league, he was really struggling with what to do. And so the things I had to tell Levon, and you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but at some point, you know, it's a business, and you know, just because you are maybe bigger, faster, stronger, or you know, whatever, you think you're more athletic or whatever it is, like sometimes things just don't work out even when you are the better athlete. Right. Other guys there's all sorts of reasons why guys get shots and guys don't. And it's the same way in the business world. But it always comes back to this basic question of, who do you serve? What value do you produce? What product is it? What service is it? how are you making the world a better place? And then once you're doing that and you have a marketplace in which you're doing that, and when I say making the world a better place, some people think, well, what nonprofit are you doing? No, the guy who makes my bread makes the world a better place because he's good at making bread and I'm good at planning people's wealth. And so I get value for that. The bread maker gets value from me. And now he can go buy shoes for his kids. And the gal who sells the shoes can do the same for her family. It goes on and on and on. This is the way a modern economy works. You have to do something of value. And I think student athletes, especially football players, would be the best at this if they made this connection. The work that they do, the small daily deposits in building themselves as a player, as an athlete, if they would do that in an economic sense, they would see similar results to what they see on the football field. Because football is just a microcosm of life. And it's ultimately the football field, it's still a meritocracy. Corporate America, the marketplace, is still a meritocracy. As much as some people try to not make it that, it is. When you produce value for people, you will be rewarded for it. And the more value you produce, the more value you will get. And trying to get guys to understand that, that's the biggest hurdle right there, that they're not walking into something totally unknown. It's something that's totally transferable, but they have to be taught that because they're generally not being taught that.
So your first meeting with an intern, a Husky athlete in an internship, what is the first tangible piece of advice when it comes to figuring out how to add value to themselves for everything that you're talking about? What is the first lesson in that curriculum, I guess you could say?
I think I kind of just hit on it. It's to get them to understand that what they spent 4 or 5, in this case now 6 years, doing is not, it's not a waste. It's not, if they didn't make the league, that wasn't the end of it. Actually, the most valuable things that they learned were being a good teammate, being accountable, showing up on time, hard work. Guys are very good at being coached. Some are good at being entrepreneurs. I would say most aren't, because when you're in a program, it's all laid out for you. It's all scheduled. You have people holding you accountable. You have people that tell you what to do. And if you want to go out in the business world, you might get a little bit of that early on, but at some point, they're not going to hold your hands. You're going to show up on time or you're going to get fired. You're going to produce value or you're not. So getting them to realize that while there are some really key transferable skills, the discipline, the hard work, the daily deposits that they make, there are also some really big differences. And that is, I'd say that idea that you're not going to have a coach anymore. You kind of have to become your own coach.
And that's really a shock to the system of somebody who has probably been in the opposite of that for their entire 21 years, right? If you think about it all the way back, there's always somebody sort of in charge of not the decisions that the student athlete makes, but at least a plan to follow from whenever they start being serious about, their craft until they walk into your office.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a huge transition. And I think the ones that can make it and that can get that idea of how to switch it. The most success I've seen it is when they have somebody coming alongside of them and mentoring them into that. And that's really what we try to do. Or we try to introduce other people who are going to do it too. So that's also a key thing that we do. We're not the smartest guys around. We're happy to say that. There's a lot of guys and gals out there a lot smarter than we are. And so what we love to do is also bring that network to bear and introduce our interns into that network of other professionals, of other entrepreneurs. And it's amazing. Some of those, I can think of one group that one guy who actually lives on Lake Washington. He does this kind of wakeboarding club with young professionals and, you know, guys, gals who are just about to get out of college. And a lot of our interns have actually ended up with that group and have this whole other network of people through that I'm not a part of that. I've heard about it, but that's what we love to do, is get them connected into those sorts of things.
Yeah, because then it comes into what are their interests, what are their strengths, and where are they going to be able to produce value for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's really it. Like, what's their passion? What's the value that they can add to the marketplace? I mean, that's what the marketplace needs. Is it needs ideas, it needs energy, it needs people who are willing to do stuff. And another thing I tell these guys too is just they don't know their own value just as a worker. I mean, it's just objectively true now. There are labor shortages. We have huge demographic problems in this country as far as the number of people that are willing to work, that are wanting to work. So the value of a college educated, hardworking young person, it just continues to grow. And getting them to see that and want to value that and not just value a sport, that's an important step as well.
Well, because then you have all these things that you've already mentioned about. You have people that are dedicated, that are hard workers, that are already used to, especially if you're a manager, are already used to listening to coaching. So not that they already have a lot of the foundational pieces that one would need to be a successful employee to start and then start moving up that ladder.
Yeah. It's a key piece to do that. And I would just say one of the things that I try to work on, even myself, is how do I, myself not having been a high level athlete, never had high level coaching. How do I kind of step into their shoes to try to figure out how to best help them through that? Because I kind of have the opposite problem. I've kind of always been a self-starter and never been coached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And moving into, all of a sudden we're in an era of NIL. And there's money to be made for these athletes right away. You've now pivoted to Montlake Players to really primarily right now focus on camps that these athletes can get paid to do the thing that they're already experts in. Tell me how that happened and how it's going.
Yeah. So after the Supreme Court, made the decision in 2021, it was actually during our second internship. And so I started talking to the guys about trying to unpack for them what this meant, and, getting resources to them. And so we just started talking about how do they now capitalize on this? And it seemed like camps was kind of low hanging fruit. And, selfishly, it was easy for me to get involved in because it was something I could put my own sons into.
Yeah.
My own sons who are Husky fans, who love the ideas, who now I get to work with them on a project, which I would just throw that out there for parents who are listening to this that think about how do they connect with their kids. If you can involve your kids with your work, man, it's awesome. It teaches them so much. Our kids are actually homeschooled, so we have a pretty flexible schedule. So I get to bring my kids into all of this stuff, and it just makes it more fun and more exciting. So I'm just trying to kill as many birds with one stone as I can.
Right.
But that was really what it came from. So we actually started Montlake Players was started by myself. And if you look us up on the Washington State registration for corporations, LLCs, it's actually Chase Scusa, who was a UW player. He's actually the other co-founder of Montlake Players. So it was really Chase and me that started this, and then did our first camp in May of 2022 after, taking several months to kind of plan it out and think about exactly how we wanted to do things.
Fast forward to today, you guys have done multiple camps with multiple players around the Seattle area.
Yeah. We've done, we've either directly, put on or been a part of. I think this will actually be our fifth camp that we're doing at the end of the month here in January. Either us directly doing it on our own or partnering with other people who are like-minded.
Where do you see Montlake Players going?
Well, what I would really like to do is build the brand value of Montlake Players. And ultimately, I would love for it to be more player led and more player run. So actually have some upcoming conversations with guys who are currently on the team about that. I mean, ideally, I would love to have a sort of board that we're accountable to, that board. So if you think of I mean, I'm willing to be the CEO as long as we need one. And I think at this point we do. I've tried to think of what would it look like to have somebody else, like a player in that role, and I just don't think they have the time to do it,
Right.
or necessarily the skill set. But to have a board of advisors for Montlake Players that will always be made up of current and maybe a former player or two, but always will be heavily represented by current players. And really, what I'd love it to be, the big, hairy, audacious goal would be that it would be the brand for UW football players that that the value that is created there would go to them, and that they could devise a system for then how that brand value will be realized by the guys on the team, and that would ultimately be more planned out and more influenced by what those players want and what they think is best for the team, and not necessarily a top-down approach where it's either the donors or me or anyone else having a subjective view of who's valuable and who should receive what.
Now, you've taken a different approach to the world of the NIL, and pre-show we talked that we really don't know exactly how everything is going to go down, but can you explain to us the difference between the way that you're going about this NIL process as opposed to somebody like Montlake Futures?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the difference would just be in the way that I'm trying to create something that is sustainable, and I think teaching useful skills that I think I can uniquely help people learn. So the way I approach it, whenever we do a camp, or like we've also done some like opportunities to sell autograph cards, which
That's been cool to watch.
Yeah, that's been a ton of fun. So anything we do, I always try to approach it with the guys that I always have the conversation, like essentially we're starting a business together. And now this business may only ever do one thing, and that is it's going to have this camp on this date. But I go through all of the basic education of what we've done to get here. So I talk to them about what's an LLC and why did we create an LLC. I talked to them about the costs associated with the camp, right? If we had to pay for the field, I talk through what that cost. Talk about we have to buy insurance for the camp, and I tell them why that's important. We look over the contract that they're signing so they understand basic contract concepts. So all of that, I always want to approach it just like I did, not just like similar to how I did when I actually started my real business to actually make my income from, which is there's a process you have to follow. And I don't know, I don't think that other NIL folks are doing that. Maybe they are. I'm not in those rooms, but I don't think that's as much of a focus. So that is one thing that we're very focused on, is trying to get the guys to understand what is it to be an entrepreneur, what is it to start to build a business, and then the way that they're compensated. I would say that whatever we come up with, it's going to be sustainable. So, and what I mean by sustainable is the compensation they receive will actually come from the product that we produced. So if that is that we signed a card and sold it, then the proceeds are going to come from the value that was created by signing and auctioning off a card. If we're going to do a camp, it's going to come from the proceeds or the sponsorships that people believe the value of the camp in terms of its advertising value, or that the people who send their children there to be trained in football and to have fun with these guys, the value that they see in having their kids attend the camp. And then those proceeds, net of the costs, are what they're going to receive, as opposed to another model, which is very different, where it would say, here's donations, here's what donors have given, and you will receive, compensation based on, their perception of what your value is. And for me, it's not that one model is right or wrong. There's just the model of what I'm able to do and what I'd rather spend my time doing. I could, in theory, go out and spend more time trying to solicit donations to try to pay the guys more. I would rather spend my time not soliciting donations, but I would rather spend my time talking to the guys about the very concepts we just talked about. Because I think the most valuable thing that I can offer them, and I mean this, it is the most valuable thing in this space. It is more valuable than $1 million deal for a year. The most valuable things these guys can walk away with is a basic understanding of how the market works and how to create value and how to build a business or how to build value in a business for themselves. If they can do that, they will be set for the rest of their lives in terms of their ability to be gainfully employed and their ability to relate to other people. If all they ever do is receive money from other people based on a subjective belief about, or even their current value, they won't always have that current value. You won't always be the starting player at your position at the University of Washington. At some point, it's going to be somebody else, and you're going to have to figure out a way to make your way in the world without that. That's, to me, the most valuable thing that they can learn. And so I think I want to focus on what's most valuable, and I think that's most valuable. And I think that time will tell, but yeah, I think 5, 10, 20 years down the road, I think the guys that go through what we do, I think they'll be better off than the guys who didn't. And I think they'll be better off than guys who never learned those skills.
Yeah, because they can take whatever they're getting and they'll be able to use it to their benefit, not just a payday, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And I've already seen it. Easy come, easy go. I've already talked to some players that I know made over $10,000 last year. In some cases, significantly more. And one in particular, I mentioned to him that he needs to pay taxes in April. And, as of when we last spoke, not too long ago, he had $1 in his savings account and he had no money set aside to pay for taxes. So, like I said, easy come, easy go. Yeah, you made a lot of money, but you're gonna have to pay taxes on it. And that just introduces this whole other problem that my hope would be that the guys who go through what we're doing don't experience that. Obviously, they have choices to make. I can't make them set aside money for taxes and things like that.
Right.
But I can certainly encourage them in that direction. And I'm
Yeah,
sure other people
you're filling their tool belt.
Yeah, and other people are as well. I mean, I know that
Sure.
I know I'm not the only one. I know that other people in this space are definitely also encouraging them to do the right thing.
One of the things on the most basic level, you take out all of the extra things that you're doing for this, for the internships and financial literacy and adding value. I think of my friend and former receiver, DeAndre Campbell, and what he's done to build a business around his skill set, and thinking that while he had to build that mostly on his own from the ground up, being a transplant from California to Seattle, you're giving these players the opportunity to really see if that's something that they want to pursue after their career's over, and already have the skills on how to organize and run, and some of the nuances that people don't think about, like insurance and like field rentals and all of the money that goes into it. You're giving these guys almost a ladder to climb to get to this place where, if that's what they want to do, they'll be a lot more successful at it quicker.
Yeah, that's certainly my goal, is that educational piece, and yeah, trying to give them ideas and skills around how they can create their own value, and get them excited about that, get them engaged in that process, and get them off of the idea that oh, look what so-and-so got from this other group, so-and-so got a big deal and I've been here longer and I play more and yada yada yada. I'm like, don't put your energy into things that you cannot control. Instead, focus it and put it on positive things that are actually going to build something for you and for your future that you own. And I kind of alluded to that earlier. Ultimately, that's my goal for Montlake Players. I really, Chase is involved with it. He's a former player and he has, ownership in it. But I really want this to eventually be a thing that is really driven by and led by the players. And it's really their brand and it's their thing that they get to go out and capture value from the marketplace for themselves through, and then distribute it in a way that makes sense in light of their experience and in light of their values.
Scott, thank you for coming on. I think this has been really illuminating to me, for me at least, to really understand what Montlake Players is doing and how it's benefiting the student athlete. My two final questions are: how do people follow what you're doing, and then how can people get involved?
Yeah, that's great. So a few things. I'm probably most active in terms of social media on Twitter, and so really that's another way I'm trying to build a social media brand. And that's just me. I stick to Husky football or college football generally, but mostly Husky football. I try to be funny and entertaining there sometimes, so it's not always totally serious.
You've succeeded.
Yeah, every once in a while. I'm not Wendy's yet. I'm not that good, but I'm trying to get better on Twitter. So you can definitely follow us, at Montlake Players on Twitter. And then there's also the website, which is montlakeplayers.com. And I have a few things on there. I send out an email list for folks that want to be the first to know about new camps or new opportunities. So definitely there's a link there. You can send me your email. I don't sell it to third parties. I don't monetize it. It's just literally for me to let you know first, or just follow us on Twitter, because the day after I send out the email, I post it on Twitter, so people know the latest. And then, I would say I think you DM me on Twitter. I respond to those, so you can always DM us there. If you have an idea of a camp, a location that you think Montlake Players would be helpful in running a sustainable camp, would love to hear from you. If you are interested in sponsorship, I even had somebody, I have a thing on there, like if somebody wants to we're not a nonprofit, so there's no tax write-off, but I've also put a thing on there, like if somebody just wants to pay for a kid to go to a camp, we always charge at least something. This time, the last one, it was $20. People can just kick $20 in, and that indubitably, I have somebody that reaches out to me and says, my kid wants to go to the camp, but I can't afford it. I have funds set aside to do that. Awesome. Actually, I'll give him a shout out. When I sold Zion ZTF's card, he didn't want the proceeds that he was due, and so Zion actually put some money into that fund. So some kid is going to get to go hopefully to a camp that Zion is at this summer, and Zion will have paid for him to be at that camp. That is
really, really cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that is really inspiring. I really enjoy that. That's really cool. Scott, thank you for the time that you've given here, and thank you for really the foundation that you're bringing to guys that we look at, we really enjoy watching, and we root for on and off the field. So I really do appreciate everything you're doing.
Yeah, no, thanks. Appreciate you and the podcast, and it's been great getting to know you better, and appreciate your time on this as well. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for spreading the word about I think the really good side of NIL stuff, especially that's going on at Washington, which, as we all know, has the best best NIL in the country. Even better than OSU.
Yeah.
A certain quarterback even alluded to how good our NIL is. So the word's getting out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you guys are the foundation of it. So again, make sure you go follow Montlake Players on Twitter at Montlake Players. Scott, can I get a go dogs?
Go dogs.